Good morning, everybody. My name is Ingrid Sub Cuc. I am Indigenous Mayan, Kekchikel Kekchi. I am originally from Guatemala, but I'm a current graduate student at the University of Washington in the Department of Global Health. The focus of my work is around Indigenous health systems and ways that we can restore balance between Western and Indigenous health systems to better provide for Indigenous communities around the globe. This was my first time taking a Native American Indigenous Studies class. It was something that I was very much looking forward to, especially as an Indigenous woman, not only to learn a little bit more about the urban environment here in the Seattle area and how Indigenous communities and peoples continue to uphold their identities and their cultures in an ever-changing world and climate. So this class, Indigenizing Conservation in a Changing Climate, was very enriching and a really wonderful experience for me to not only learn about the communities here, but also about myself and what indigenizing spaces really mean, and also indigenizing within academia. So for this project, I decided to write a little poem. I guess it's a little bit more also just a self-reflection, some thoughts that I had and the feelings that I experienced as we went through the quarter in this class with the different readings and the different concepts, but also during the time that we spent volunteering at Daybreak Star Indian Community Center, which is a native urban space here in the Seattle area. And that was truly a wonderful experience. So these are reflections that I've had from that. So the title of my piece is Indigenizing Conservation, Healing and Decolonization of Space. And what I refer to here in terms of space, I'm talking about self, community, and world. I'm a true believer that in order for us to truly get on a path of decolonization and also healing, it must happen in community. We, all of us, despite whatever identity and whatever history we make up who we are as people, we all participate and we all must contribute to a healing space in order to truly preserve what's best for our Mother Earth. So here we go. I grew up surrounded by mountains, volcanoes, and lakes. The idea of owning these natural relatives was one of humanity's biggest mistakes. You see, Indigenous peoples know that we do not own anything in nature. Nature is our mother. Nature is our provider. Nature is to be taken care of. We take what we need and we leave the rest for others. Conservation to me means another tactic at westernizing land, just as those first settlers did by enslaving our motherland. Colonization ripped us from our mother's arms. It planted a seed of shame, pain, and intergenerational trauma, a wound so deep it has taken centuries to heal. Yet, Indigenous peoples are still here, and we still feel the responsibility to restore balance. Because despite 500 plus years of resistance, we ourselves have now adapted to survive this system. This survival has inevitably planted invasive colonial seed in our hearts and beings. It has taken deep roots that have clouded our concept of well-being. Indigenizing conservation, therefore, to me, is restoring Otzkaslemal, el buen vivir, a full life. To achieve Otzkaslemal means to question, to reconcile, to unlearn colonizing behaviors, restoring our concept of being a good steward and a good neighbor. Indigenizing conservation is therefore about reconciliation, decolonization, and restoration, recognizing the ever-intertwined relationship between humanity and Mother Nature. Indigenizing conservation introduces the other side of the equation, our responsibility to give up our comfort and dependence on the exploitation of resources. It's coming to terms that we can all contribute in whatever space we occupy, letting ourselves disconnect from the capitalist, individualist, colonial forces. For me, that is remembering that this urban environment that we call Seattle continues to be the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish peoples. Despite forced removal and relocation, if we are truly committed to indigenization, let's not forget that these lands depend on their original caretakers for restoration, not preservation, not salvation. At this point, it's restoring a restoration of balance. The day I spent moving invasive species at Daybreak Star, I truly understood how deep invasive roots really are. The act of actively working with your hands and feet to remove what does not belong made me understand the pain and suffering that comes with decolonizing, especially alone. The process of indigenizing and decolonizing cannot happen in isolation. It must and can only happen in community. So what does Daybreak Star represent to urban indigenous peoples? It represents healing in community. Because removing the invasive roots of colonization from land isn't easy, much less from our hearts. Removing the pervasive beliefs about owning nature, owning land, owning plants, owning everything for exploitation. As my hands and feet worked hard to remove the blackberries from the community garden, I felt my own heart at work, trying to understand my own identity, my own doubts, my own history, and my own pain. But the most beautiful thing was seeing the strength and confidence in community also being gained. Because I wasn't there alone. I was there with other students who, for very different reasons, were all there to do their part, to restore balance, to work towards Utskas Lemal, el buen vivir, a full life. Thank you. So I want to end this by just saying that in reflecting about my experience during this class and during the time that I got to volunteer at Daybreak Star Indian Community Center, it was, I think, in a way, a really good metaphor to what colonization is. It has been for some of our indigenous community 500 plus years of persistence and survival under colonizing systems, and those roots run deep. Just as invasive species that we saw in the garden, they run very deep, and it's a process of removing them, which can be painful and can be very hard work. But I think there was also a lot of hope in that. That exercise that we did at the community center was also done in community with other students, but also other members of the community that were just there to volunteer. And I think that's exactly what, for me, a process of decolonization is. It must happen in community, and everybody must participate, whether that is how do we remove colonizing concepts from ourselves? How do we remove it from our lives? And how do we remove it from our spaces in order to really restore a balance that keeps us in good relationship with Mother Earth? So I'm grateful for the opportunity to share this with you, and I'm grateful for the experiences and lessons that I have learned from everybody in this class. Matios Chiwa, muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Bye.